Now, so where are we in the history, right? We did a bit of back and forth. So we came from the 1950s where there was enthusiasm, then the spring period, then the winter period, then the more stable period where people were still looking at things. There was some success in the 1990s in terms of convolutional neural networks actually being used for real world problems. But still some disappointment in terms of very large networks not being able to train despite backpropagation being known and universal approximation theorem being understood, right? And then 2006, around that time, these things changed. And then from 2006 to 2012, a lot of other advances happened which gave us a better understanding of deep learning. And we were able to train these networks to work for the ImageNet and similar challenges, and started showing gains, not just gain, but starting winning some of these prestigious competitions, right? So that's where we are. And then after that, from 2016 onwards, there was further acceleration, right? So we wanted to come with better optimization methods. So now we know that it's possible to train deep neural networks. But now can we do it faster? Can we lead to convergence faster, right? What this animation here is trying to show, that I want to come to this configuration where the 2 points on the left hand side figure exactly fit, or the sigmoid function exactly fits to those 2 points. And I'm trying to solve some optimization problem for that. And it's taking me a while to reach to the solution, right? So can I speed that up, right? Of course, faster convergence was always a goal, right, which existed in machine learning when we had the machine learning approaches which were again solved using optimization problems. We always wanted faster convergence, and Nesterov in 1983 had proposed a method which does better than the gradient descent approach which I had mentioned earlier, right? It leads to faster convergence. Now that idea got scaled further, and a series of optimization algorithms, all of which we are going to cover and discuss, or most of this, not maybe all of this, ADAGRAD, RMS Prop, ADAM, NADAM, ADAM-W, RADAM, and so on, right? It just continues. And all of these, the goals was to have models, have algorithms which lead to faster and better convergence, right? You lead, in deep learning, there are multiple minima possible. So can you reach to a better minima in faster time, right? And there's been a series of algorithms proposed to that, which has led to now deep learning models being able to train faster. In parallel, there also been progress in what are known as learning rate schedules. Now we have much more complex learning rate schedules than what we used 10 years back. And all of that has led to stable as well as faster training of deep neural networks. Of course, still much more is desired, but we have made a lot of progress. And then these advances are something that we'll cover in the course. Yeah, this is still about the better optimization methods. And then we also had better activation functions, right? So earlier in the 1980s to 90s, there was only the logistic function, right? Which is the first function, the blue colored function that you see on the slide here, right? But since then, there has been like an industry of activation functions that has been proposed, and each of them with the motivation of stabilizing the training, right? Or leading to better performance and faster conversions, right? And many of these activation functions we are going to cover in the course. TANH is something that we'll see ReLU, we'll see leaky ReLU, parametric ReLU, and some of these other functions, right? GeLU, ELU, and so on, right? So many of these functions have been proposed, and they all have shown to be useful in different contexts, right? So we will look at many of these throughout the course, and all of this has also led to better stability and performance, right? So once we discovered that deep neural networks can really be trained, there was a lot of interest in that and making them better and better, and that's where better activation functions, better optimization functions, better regularizations. I forgot to include a slide on that. So regularization in the terms of dropout or even batch normalization, you could think of it as a regularization in some sense, have been proposed to improve the training and stability of these networks, right? So that's what this period was about. Okay. So far we have discussed about the progress of deep learning in general, and then zoomed into a bit of image processing where we or image applications where we talked about convolutional neural networks, right? The other important category of problems that you deal with in real life and which are popular in the deep learning context is the problems involving sequences, right? So let's look at what these problems are. So you encounter sequences everywhere, right? So we encounter sequences everywhere, right? If you be it videos or if you have speech, a speech is like a sequence of phonemes, right? And we need to do speech processing, we need to do video processing, and these are all inputs here are naturally sequenced, right? So we need sequence processing algorithms. Of course, this need was discovered, need was realized long back, and as is the case with convolutional neural networks, very long back in 1982, we had something known as an Hopfield network. I'll not go into the details of it, it's not something that we'll cover in the course also, but it was something which was able to do some kind of a sequence processing, right? More relevant to this course is this what is known as recurrent neural networks, where the idea is that you have a sequence of inputs and you want to have some interaction between these inputs, right? So, for example, when I'm talking, it's not that every phoneme or every microsecond of speech can be, a millisecond of speech can be analyzed independently. It has some connection to what I just spoke previously, right? So I should have networks which are aware that such dependency between the inputs or interactions between the inputs are useful and should allow for those interactions, right? So the Jordan network, which is one type of recurrent neural network, allowed the output at each time step to be fed as input for the next time step, and that way allow interactions between different time steps. So think of a sequence of images or sequence of frames which forms a video, and you want to do some kind of video classification at the end. So it's important that every sequence interacts with the other sequence so that it understands what is happening in the entire sequence as a whole. So recurrent neural network allows us to do that. It entered natural language processing in around 2013 or 14, but this idea has been there much before that, right? And there were two different types of recurrent neural networks which were popular. Well, the question, of course, is that if they were proposed in 1990 and if it made sense for sequences and people were interested in a lot of NLP and speech at that time, both NLP and speech have sequence of words and sequence of phonemes, then why were these networks not being used? Again, the same challenge. There was a lot of work around that time which showed that it's very hard to train these networks. In particular, there was this problem of exploding and vanishing gradients, which we'll again cover in the course, which did not allow these networks at that time to be used for real world problems, right? But as things changed after 2006 is when we discovered, hey, we can suddenly train deep neural networks, and in the next 7-8 years we made advances in optimization algorithms, activation functions, regularization, and so on. Things started improving. And again, in 1997, before going to 2006, I should have finished this. In 1997, long short-term memory cells, LSTMs, which were proposed, which again alleviated this problem of exploding, of vanishing gradients in particular, and but still they were not being used for real-world applications due to the other reasons which I had said, right? Compute was a challenge, large-scale data sets were a challenge. But now when we entered 2014, a lot of things fell into place, right? Deep learning got better. We had a better understanding of how to stabilize the training. We had much more compute. By this time, GPUs had already entered the scene. We had much more data, large-scale data sets which allowed training these networks, right? So, and that's when in 2014, deep neural networks or recurrent neural network based models entered NLP. And since then, there's been almost no looking back, right? All these traditional models which were probabilistic and statistical in nature. Of course, you also have some probabilistic modeling here, but the statistical machine translation models which were popular at that time were almost completely replaced by these recurrent neural networks and LSTMs, right? And then in 2017 came what are known as transformer networks, and we'll have a separate section on them later on, which then slowly started replacing these RN and LSTM networks, but it took a couple of years at least for that transition to happen. So I would think around 2014 to 2019-ish is when this RNNs and LSTMs, which were proposed way back in 1990s and 1997, dominated at least the NLP and speech scene as far as deep learning was concerned. And then they were slowly replaced by transformers, right? And today we are in the era of transformers, and we'll have a separate section discussing the history of transformers later on, right? So I think I'll end this section here where we looked at a new type of input, sequences, and again the same story, nothing new. These models, the need for processing sequences was felt much earlier. The relevant neural network models itself for proposing speech were proposed in 1986, 1990, 1997, but at that time, due to various reasons, it was not conducive to train them on large-scale data sets. with good compute, train for longer durations. They had also this vanishing exploding gradient problem. Some of these things were fixed in the period of 2006 to 2014, and then they became popular in the sequence learning problems in NLP and speech, right? And even in vision, for example, captioning a video or an image. Okay. Now, the next thing that I would like to talk about is another class of problems where deep learning became very popular, which was at game playing, right? And we started seeing various results where in extremely complex game environments, RL reinforcement learning agents started beating humans, right? So let's start. Around 2015, you have these Atari games, and reinforcement learning was always used for playing games. Right? There was many classical textbooks on that, where you had certain gaming environments like the Pac-Man environment or the ping pong environment, and you could train a RL agent to kind of learn how to play those games. Right? So these are those console-based games that were popular many years ago. Right? And in 2015 came this deep reinforcement learning paradigm, which was able to play all these Atari games and win all of them hands down, right? And beat humans at them, what I mean by that. Then the one popular breakthrough which came was this a reinforcement learning agent which could play this game of Go, right? If you're not aware of Go, then in very layman terms I would tell you that it's something much more complex than chess. You all know that chess has many rules and there's an exponential number of possibilities there depending on what I play, and then there are many routes or many paths which open up, right? So Go is something which is even more complex than it. It's again a strategy based game, and unlike previous algorithms which used brute force kind of strategies, this reinforcement learning agent based on deep reinforcement learning was able to beat the best Go players at that time, right, in 2015. And this of course gained a lot of popularity and attention, and deep RL became a very popular area, and it still continues to be, right. Then in 2016, again using the same deep reinforcement learning based players or agents, people were able to beat professional poker players, right. I mean, these are the people who participate in these world championships in pokers, and they were able to beat many of them in the game of poker, right. Similar advances in much more complex strategy games which have complex visual environments as well as complex strategies, which, for example, the Defense of the Ancients, some of you would have played it. And OpenAI did this very interesting thing that it just made an agent play with itself, right? And it played like 10,000 years of gaming. Right? Just imagine that. I mean, there's no way you can compare to this kind of scale, right? And so 10,000 years of training they did on, of course, a distributed set of compute. And they were able to demonstrate that just by playing with itself, the agent is able to get this expert level performance and beat the best Dota players at that time, right? So again, very complex problems, very strategy based games with the inputs also being complex. You're getting the inputs in form of images, right? It's not like some signals, but an entire image is being fed, and looking at the image, you're trying to decide what the next step is going to be. And there are various possibilities there, various strategies to learn. It's able to learn all of this and being able to beat humans, right? And then around the same time, to kind of popularize this research in RL, right, where are these complex games which require this 10,000 hours of playing and so on, maybe only the big deep tech companies can do that, but can you have simpler environments which have a lot of this complexity, but you use those environments to train some of these or advance the research in deep reinforcement learning. So that's why this OpenAI Gym was released, which became a toolkit for developing and comparing reinforcement learning algorithms. Because this entire deep reinforcement learning based work is something that we will not cover in this course, but it's important that you are aware of that. That's one branch which you could explore as you continue on your journey on deep learning, right? Similarly, there was another Gym Retro, right, a newer version of that which had 1,000 games, very different environments which people could experiment with, right, and again complex strategy games. Then similarly, Alpha Star, which has to balance to learn short-term and long-term goals. These are all games which you are aware of. These are complex strategy games which you play, and you can imagine as humans also we take a while to understand what needs to be done, and we are never perfect in any of these. But now RL agents are being able to learn how to play these games on their own. Right? This was again a very interesting demo video, which or work that they had done, where they had these agents, the blue orange guys that you see in the screenshot there, where you have this a flat a floor, right? You can imagine it's a floor, and which you could have some places where you could hide. You could construct a wall so that you can hide from the person who is chasing you. If you are a chaser, you could destroy a wall to find, to look for people inside, or you could build a ramp. You can see that yellow ramp in the figure. So you could climb up the ramp and peep inside the structure and see whether someone is hiding, right? And all of this, the RL agents were able to learn quite well, right? That is the ability to chase and hide, build a defensive shelter, break a shelter, use a ramp to search inside, and so on. It's a very interesting demo video that you should see, right? And what is emerging in all of this, the underlying theme is that very complex decision-making strategies were being able to learn using these deep reinforcement learning agents. And while all of these specialized in like one task, then came this mu0, which can do multiple things, right? Because you always aim for, always one argument is that, hey, your AI agent can do only one thing, whereas a typical human, and you might be able to beat a human in that one thing, but a human can do many other things, right? So if you have a good Go player, Go RL agent, maybe it beats the best Go player, but that player can also play chess, that could also play badminton, can also play table tennis, and so many other things, where your agent is doing one thing itself, right? And so now there's this push to have what are known as master of all models. So this mu0 was the first, among the first step in that direction, which could not only play Go, but also chess, shogi, and Atari, right? These are again all decision-making games. And so it could do multiple of these games in a single RL agent, right? So going towards more general intelligence, right? And becoming a master of many traits, right? And similar research is progressing, where you now have this player of games, a general purpose algorithm, which learns to play in different conditions, right? So a lot of progress has happened in this deep reinforcement learning over the years. None of this we'll cover in the course, but this is important for you to know, as I said, and you could explore this on your own once you understand the other basic concepts in the course. So I'll end this module here.